I'll make you CEO if you translate this right here in front of everyone.
Graham Whitaker's baritone boomed through the gilded ballroom of a historic Fifth Avenue hotel as he held up a thick contract. Laughter cracked like thunder around the long marble table, every chuckle aimed at the housekeeper clutching a tray with trembling hands. Elena Morales felt the floor tilt beneath her. She wasn't used to spotlights, much less a room full of diamonds and tuxedos. Her gray uniform felt like a stain against the sequined gowns and crystal flutes. But the humiliation left her no exit. She had to answer. Graham's smile was razor clean, certain she'd fold under the ridicule. Elena drew a shaky breath and fixed on the pages in his hand. What began as a cruel joke was about to turn into a duel no one would forget. Before we go on, tell us, where are you watching from? Follow our channel so you won't miss the next story. Tales of love, redemption, and second chances. He rapped his knuckles on the marble. Executives laughed on cue. Across from him stood Elena, the faint scent of cheap soap clinging to her sleeves. She had only come to gather empty glasses and slipped into a hunter's snare. Everyone, look here, Graham said, lifting the contract. Tonight, this woman gets a chance to shine, if she can read anything besides detergent labels. The table erupted. Jason Cole, an eager-to-please VP, choked on a laugh. Across the table, Graham's daughter, Isabel, shifted, her gaze tightening on her father. Elena pressed her lips together. She wanted to vanish. Her lungs pulled at the thin air, each giggle snapping off another piece of courage. "Come on," Graham murmured, poison sweet. "Prove you can do something besides mop a floor. Translate this, right now. Nail it, and I name you CEO of Whitaker Holdings." Silence, then a wave of laughter, the joke of the year. Rose Bennett, the other server, started toward Elena, but Elena lifted a small hand. "Don't." Pride bled, but it still beat. She raised her eyes and met Graham's. "And if I try?" she whispered. The laughter swelled. Jason doubled over. Nate Leeds, the company attorney, pushed up his glasses with a smirk. Graham, savoring the spectacle, dropped the contract in front of her. Paper thudded on stone like a gauntlet. "Go on. Shock us if you can." Elena reached out. The pages were heavy, dense with legal hedges and words that braided into mazes. Her pulse shook, but her eyes began to move, as if an old door inside had unlatched. The room's murmur thinned. The woman they assumed couldn't string two English words together was about to speak. Graham cut in, lazy and lethal. "Let's go. Or stand there and prove we were right." Elena filled her lungs. Her throat scraped dry, yet the sentences gathered in her mind, crisp and familiar, like notes she used to hum in the dark. Glasses stilled, sequins flashed. The night held its breath. The contract lay between them like a cursed relic. Thick stock, embossed seals, more trap than text. The guests watched, hungry to witness a public collapse. Graham leaned back, arms folded, pleased as a crowned king. "Let me be perfectly clear," he said, chin lifted. "If she translates every line correctly, I name her CEO. Right here." Laughter crashed again. Jason applauded like Graham had landed a perfect punchline. Isabel's frown deepened. She didn't dare challenge him, yet. Elena dug her fingers into the pages, heat of eyes on her skin, every chuckle a thorn. "Do you accept?" Graham pressed. "Or would you rather return to your mop?" Elena swallowed. "I accept." The room quit breathing. A distant wall clock ticked in the hush. Jason blinked, stunned that she dared. Graham's grin widened. "Perfect. Begin." He shoved the contract toward her, pages sliding across the marble like a white tide. Elena inhaled. Slow. Steady. The letters looked like brickwork at first. Then, in the back of her mind, a forgotten match struck. Years ago, she'd studied into the small hours, translating by lamplight when she still believed life might deliver what it promised. She would not fail. Not tonight. Nate Leeds folded his arms, almost amused. This should be interesting, he muttered. Elena traced a line with her fingertip. The page burned at the edges of her vision. She opened her mouth. The ice agreement between the parties, she started, her tongue skidding. Snickers sputtered. A woman in a red dress whispered, "Poor thing can't even pronounce it." Elena steadied. Disagreement between the parties is valid and binding. The room's noise dipped. Nate's brows lifted. Imperfect accent, yes, but too clean, too exact for someone they'd decided could only scrub floors. "Keep going," Graham said, feigning boredom. "We're just warming up." "The undersigned agrees to the terms and conditions," she read, voice still shaky but building cadence. The crowd traded looks, mockery thinned into attention. Isabel leaned in, eyes wide. Rose clenched her tray against her ribs. "Hold, Elena, hold." Elena lifted her gaze from the page. She wasn't just reading. She was translating aloud, sentence by sentence. "This agreement between the parties is valid and binding," she said in Spanish first, then, catching herself, repeated calmly in English, "and the person signing accepts all terms and conditions." A frost fell over the table. The room realized the joke had pointed the wrong way. "That's basic," Graham snapped, a crack in his smile. "Let's see you last 5 minutes." Elena's eyes glinted. "Failure to comply will result in legal action before the International Court of Arbitration," she read, translating with surgical precision. Nate's eyes widened. Nobody in that room expected her to cut through legal jargon like a hot wire. Elena turned a page and stopped. Something hid there, a small, mean hinge nobody else had noticed. "The company reserves the right to terminate this contract unilaterally," she read, then added for the room, clean and even, "meaning they can end it at will." Heads pivoted toward Graham. That wasn't a harmless phrase. It was leverage disguised as formality. Nate shifted, uncomfortable. He hadn't planned on being outflanked by a housekeeper. "Lucky guess," Jason tried, voice off-key. "She'll trip," Elena continued. "The undersigned waives the right to appeal under local jurisdiction." Glasses froze mid-air. Eyes slid downward. Shame began to ripple where laughter had been. Isabel stared at her father. Each sentence cracked his mask a little more. Graham drummed the table, annoyed. "Enough parroting. Do you even understand what you're saying?" "I'm not parroting," Elena replied, steady. "I'm explaining. This contract forces acceptance of unfair terms and strips the signer of a fair defense, especially if they don't speak English like a lawyer." The silence that followed had weight. It pressed down. "Fine," Graham growled, turning to Nate. "Give her the complicated part." Nate opened a second folder, a thicket of indemnities, waivers, and cross-references. A paper meant to break any amateur. "This," Graham said, the smile returning like a knife, "is where pretenders bleed." Elena took the page. Words spiraled, acronyms and nested clauses. Her fingers shook, but she didn't let go. Rose took a half step, then stopped at Elena's glance. No rescuing, just witness. Jason barked a laugh. "See? She's already stuck." Elena lifted her eyes to him, said nothing. The silence landed like a slap. She looked back down. Her mind drifted. Those midnight hours when her son slept in a thrift store crib and she translated practice texts by a borrowed lamp. Professors' warnings about legalese, the way language could be a gate or a key. She began, uncertain at first, but grounded in meaning. Notwithstanding the provisions stated herein, the shareholder irrevocably acknowledges the waiver of... She paused, translated. "No matter what's written elsewhere, the shareholder gives up specific rights permanently." Isabel's hand went to her chest. Nate frowned, listening harder. This wasn't mimicry. Elena understood. Graham leaned forward. Keep going if you can. The right to claim any compensation or indemnification in case of, she read, then finished firmly, in case of loss, is limited to what's written here and nowhere else. The ballroom went still. Jokes had curdled into something like respect. Elena turned the last page of the section. In the event of force majeure, she read cleanly, neither party shall be liable for failure or delay in performance, including but not limited to natural disasters, war, or governmental actions. No wobble now, the cadence of someone who had paid in late nights and coffee she couldn't afford. She finished one more line. The breaching party shall indemnify the other for any liquidated damages agreed upon herein. Nate exhaled, incredulous. There weren't errors to hide behind. Enough, Graham barked, but the word had lost its crown. Elena met his eyes. This document was built to strip rights from anyone desperate enough to sign it. You knew that. Tonight they know it too. No one moved. Time hung from the chandeliers. Jason slid lower in his chair. Isabel stood, voice a tremor wrapped in steel. Dad, that's enough. Graham's jaw flexed. For decades, he had fed on compliant laughter and curated fear. Now, a woman in a gray uniform had snapped the wire. Who fed you those lines? He demanded. Who coached you? No one, Elena said. I studied languages in college. The words landed like a strike. Heads turned. Nate took off his glasses. Isabel blinked. Graham laughed once, dry. College? Then how'd you end up with a broom? Elena swallowed. I got pregnant at 19. My son needed food and a safe place to sleep. I took any job that let me give him both. A heavy quiet spread. Some guests lowered their eyes. The invisible woman had a past, and it sounded like sacrifice. That doesn't make her less, Isabel said softly. Graham ignored her, staring at Elena like a blade. So you walked away from lectures for diapers, he said. And now you think you belong at my table? I don't think anything, Elena replied. You tested me to humiliate me. I passed. And now you're looking for a new excuse. The line cracked across the room. Heads lifted. The bullying wasn't entertainment anymore. It was ugly. Graham snapped his fingers. One more. The worst of it. Nate slid out a final paragraph, clauses coiled tight as barbed wire, indemnification, arbitration venue, liquidated damages, limitation of liability, choice of law. Elena's hands were cold. Her eyes burned. This was more than a challenge. It was a chance to lift her dignity back onto its feet, even if only for a minute. She read it all, careful, exact, then translated in plain English so everyone could understand what they'd been laughing at, who would pay, who could never sue, how the language of arbitration would be English only, and how every road out had been quietly closed. When she stopped, the room was a cathedral. Nate cleared his throat. Mr. Whitaker, she translated accurately. There's nothing to contest. The sound of arrogance collapsing is small, chairs scraping, throats being cleared, rings set softly on glass. Elena did not smile. Her eyes were wet, not with triumph, but with relief. This is a circus, Graham snapped, but the authority had drained from his voice. You said you'd make me CEO if I translated it here tonight, Elena said. I did. A collective intake of air. Isabel turned to her father, sorrow and challenge braided together. Keep your word, Dad. Graham's fingers tapped a frantic rhythm on linen. For the first time in his public life, he had no door. At last he stood. The chair's legs grated against stone, a hard, ugly sound. He walked around the table and faced Elena, pride burning across his face. Fine, he said, rough. As of this moment, you are Chief Executive Officer of Whitaker Holdings. Gasps, murmurs. Jason's mouth fell open. The world they knew flipped with a dull thud. Rose's eyes filled. Her friend, the one who shared split-shift coffees and blistered heels, had done what people say can't be done. Elena didn't glow. She held Graham's stare. "It isn't what I want," she said. "It's what you promised." The line iced the room. It wasn't arrogance, it was justice. Isabel stepped closer and took Elena's hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "Tonight you showed us what courage looks like." Applause began, shy, then gathering, not for a winner, but for a lesson. The sound washed over Elena like balm poured over old bruises. Graham stood rigid, trapped inside the scene he had scripted for someone else. Laughter gone, control gone, power gone. The applause ebbed. Guests drifted toward the doors, talking low, skirts whispering along the marble. Rose came to Elena's side and slipped an arm through hers. No words, none big enough. Isabel watched her father, small now somehow. The man she'd thought unbreakable sat with his eyes on the tablecloth, hands flat, the room's judgment heavier than any speech. Elena breathed in. She hadn't asked for applause or a title. All she wanted was for the night to testify, dignity isn't negotiable. Quiet pain can speak if it's given a mic. She walked across the ballroom, each step a metronome the room would remember. At the door, she glanced back. Her eyes met Graham's. No hate there, no victory, just a truth he could not dodge. The door's side closed. The city's night air slipped in. Cool, indifferent. Somewhere above, the skyline glittered. To Elena, the darkness glowed with a private light. She had taken back something no one could repossess. Inside, a billionaire sat among empty glasses and a silence that no longer worked as a weapon, only a sentence. That night carved itself into memory. What began as a stunt peeled back something deeper. Clothing doesn't confer worth. Money doesn't mint respect. Graham Whitaker thought he could strip a woman's dignity in a room stuffed with wealth and power. But it was his own pride that stood naked by the end. Elena Morales, with a steady heart and stubborn hope, didn't just translate an impossible document. She translated her years of struggle into a lesson the room needed to hear. Real greatness isn't in titles or bank accounts. It's in the way we respect, forgive, and lift our heads even when the world laughs. If this story stirred something in you, share which moment hit you hardest, and pass it along to someone who needs a reminder that quiet voices can move the room. If stories like this move you, tap the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next tale. And if you believe in true love, family, and dignity, drop true love in the comments and share this with someone who needs it today.